Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, yWhales. So really special edition here today. We normally talk about a lot about Web3, blockchain, cryptocurrencies, NFT, lots of projects. Today we have a hardware manufacturer. Alvin is here with HTC, and Stefan and I are both really excited for this because it's actually something physical and tangible. Most of the things we talk about you can't see them in the physical world if you leave a screen. And when you think about what HTC, who's been in, I believe, the virtual reality game longer than almost anyone else, longer than Oculus. I think you guys predate the Vive. I was one of the very first VR headsets I had, and I had those beautiful towers scattered about an entire room. And I think I broke 2 or 3 lamps running around being chased by zombies. And the early phases of this was really just kind of like proof of concept, like it worked and it was cool, gave you a little bit of a headache. But now suddenly we have, you guys are moving into 5K screens that are, fractions of a size. There's so many cool things. And I don't want to jump too far into this other than the fact, one of the hottest spaces in one of the hottest asset classes. And Alvin, very nice to meet you, sir.
Yeah, well, thanks for inviting me, Jay and Stefan. It's good to be on your show.
Fabulous. So let's start by taking a few steps back and go, kind of pre-HTC, because you and I had a nice conversation the other day, and you've been around, blockchain and cryptocurrencies for a while. So let's talk, a little bit about how you kind of got into Web3, and then we'll get into the hardware stuff.
Yeah. So I've been in VR for a long time. I started studying and researching VR in 1991. So about 30 years ago, kind of before it became a popular thing, or maybe there was the first wave of VR that kind of died down. But I had studied under Tom Furness, who was the godfather of VR. He actually has been in it for almost 60 years. He was part of the U.S. Air Force, which was doing kind of super cockpit research, and he helped design all of that. And then he went to University of Washington to start up the HIT lab, the Human Interface Technology Lab. So I was there working with him on some projects related to applying VR to education. So using it as an immersive education medium to have essentially a full brain experience for learning, right? Where most of our learning today is, very limited, where either you're just looking at somebody in the board in front of you, or you're watching a video, which doesn't give you the memories that you would get from actually doing anything. So what VR does is that it really allows you to feel like you did something, you experienced something, and that's how our brains are designed to remember information. And so that was kind of my core study for a number of years. And but in the meantime, nothing really much happened in VR for about 20 years. But over the last 6-10 years, things have really taken off. And so I had been in the internet space, I actually worked with IBM doing chip design for what was the Power PC back in the early 90s. And then also with Intel doing chip design to help them start up the China office for Intel, running the consumer business for a market that had essentially no consumer PCs. So I actually helped to drive the consumer industry for PCs in China in 1994. So there's a long story there, but since then I've also spent a lot of time. I've had 4 different venture-backed startups, 3 of them in the mobile space, 1 in the artificial intelligence space. And I joined HTC about a little over 6 years ago, when the whole VR craze kind of started to happen, and when Vive started, before they launched their first product to market. So I've kind of seen this wave of really VR and XR taking hold in the industry, and how it's spreading globally. And so I run the China business as well as the investment business, and a lot of the software arm as well. So I get to see a lot of what's going on in terms of not just what HTC is doing, but also we've invested in over 120 companies in the last 4 years, 5 years, I guess. So I get kind of a preview of a lot of things that are coming down the road. So I'm very fortunate that when I get to spend a lot of time with entrepreneurs that are doing some exciting things. So Yeah, so it's been a fun ride the last 6 years, just seeing the whole wave going up, and this year or over the last 12 months, the whole metaverse kind of hype or theme has really taken off and taken hold. So I think this time what we're going to find is that what this year is right now, 2021, is kind of like 2006 in mobile, right? It's a year before the next wave of the transformative products really come to life and really take us onto a new trajectory. So I think we're gonna see that very soon. I mean, last year I think total VR XR units last year was more than double what it was the year before, and we're gonna see that kind of a trajectory for the next several years. I think as the industry really starts to, or the world really starts to accept the value of what it is to have a virtual world you can go into instead of just a Zoom screen that even though we're spending right now doing our session on a video-based platform, I think in a few years that's going to look very archaic.
So I really want to take a step and go back, because you have a very unique experience, which is you were there for the hardware launch of Web 1. You were there for the reboot of Web 2. And now you sit here on the eve of Web 3. And what and again, you said it felt very, very similar. Can you talk about, Web 1 and where you feel that we are today? And because you're saying 2006 for Web 2, and just kind of similarities in what you're seeing in and around the industry of adoption.
Yeah, I mean, when I started in the industry, there was no browsers, right? This is before the Mosaic browsers. So when the browsers came, the internet became something that was accessible to the world, to lay users. Before you had to use FTP and Gopher and a lot of BBSs. Nobody. There was a very one-dimensional tool. You essentially get text back and forth. It was very limited communication medium. But then, with hyperlinks, with pictures, with some kind of animated GIF, you started to have something that was more interesting. It was like a two-dimensional content was being pushed onto the web with the browser, and making it essentially anybody can go anywhere with just a click. You didn't have to memorize IP addresses of anything, right? So. But in fact, with Web 2, or I guess it's kind of the mobile internet, or you can call it. I mean, they're two parallel tracks. I don't know if they're the same thing. I think there's the mobilization of the internet, and then there is the user generated content version. I guess both of those are considered. People call them Web 2, right? But I think they're kind of slightly different tracks. But it used to be more professionally generated content, whereas one website you go there, you look at stuff, and then it became where users can contribute and become the content. Kind of all the social networks today are all that second generation stuff, because we're not just looking at stuff that Facebook made. We're looking at stuff that our neighbors, our friends, our relatives made, and that's what brings us there. Not because there was some really cool news that came from Facebook or Instagram, right? But so I think with this next wave, we're essentially going to go from it went from 1D to 2D, and then from kind of 2D to user generated. Now we're going to go from 2D user generated to 3D and immersive, right? So I think that's really where the world is going on the next phase, where this new metaverse world is that you're going to be not just seeing somebody's feet, where you see a picture of their kids. You may actually go and be in their living room and watch their kids have their first steps, right? Or you could go to a concert and you're not there, but your friend's there, and they can stream this 360 experience to you, and you feel like you're in the first row of that concert, right? So it could be something that is people generating for you, but it could also be professionally generated content that now you're, instead of going to class by going to a classroom and seeing somebody in the whiteboard, you can actually go and live history. You can go back and see what it was like at the pyramids when it was being built. You could go to see Socrates teach. It just, those are kind of experiences that will be transformational in terms of how information is going to be distributed to people, and also create new forms of both entertainment, education, and also new forms of careers, right? New ways of working. Right now, we're pretty much limited in terms of working where our city is, where our company is, right? In the near future, it doesn't matter where your labor force is. Everybody can put on this headset, and you feel like you're around the same table. You have that team camaraderie that everybody's been looking for physically, but and we're kind of missing on the video, kind of the Zoom fatigue that we've been suffering for the last 2 years. But when you put on a headset and you start seeing people next to you, and you start being able to see their nonverbal movements, being able to go over and pat them on the back, and that kind of stuff, shake hands, just even a high five, right? That kind of stuff brings you closer and makes you part of that same team. And no matter where you are, now you actually feel like you're together, and you can be as productive. In fact, we've done studies that show you can be more productive in a virtual environment than you are in physically together. In fact, because when you're physically together, there's a lot more hierarchy. People are afraid to offend, or they want to respect the rank of the person. They don't speak, they don't participate. They just let the higher ranked person talk. But when they're virtual, they actually are more open, more willing to talk and give their opinions, which means more views come out in discussions, which means that better ideas get elevated. So there's just so much excitement. I think that I have for this new way, because I think it's going to change the way we perceive our relationship with each other, and our relationship with machines, and our relationship with the world around us, right? It's going to essentially remove geographic borders that we've had, and political borders, right? It's going to allow people who have in the past have never really wanted to talk to each other, or maybe doesn't have the chance, or don't have the means to be together, to spend time and quality time together, to understand each other. And that's how you get rid of conflict, right? People have conflict because they don't understand each other. When you go and spend 6 months, a year living somewhere, and you understand the culture, there's no way you're gonna feel like you want to attack that country, or you want to say bad things about it. You want to help create bonds between cultures once you understand both sides. I think that's something that this technology will allow us to do. I think one thing that maybe is on a tangential side is that I think it's actually going to help. One of the biggest issues we have right now facing the world is the climate issues. There's so much extra carbon being put into the world because of how much commuting we do, how much flying we do, how much goods we buy that we don't need. If we start being able to eliminate business travel, if we can take away maybe a half, a third, a tenth, or whatever of your daily commute, that's real reduction in terms of how much carbon we're putting into the world. And if you do that, that means you actually need less offices. If you don't go to the office, why do you need offices? That means we're going to need to build less buildings. In fact, construction accounts for about 30 or 40% of carbon emissions. Transportation accounts for about 30% of emissions. So if we just have those two things, we're essentially dramatically reducing our carbon footprint on this world. And in fact, if we don't have as much driving, we don't need as much parking lots, we don't need as much roads. In fact, do we need as much clothes if we're not going out and trying to show off how trendy we are? Right? I mean, do we need all these gadgets that we have, all the things that we buy that we may only use once? So I think we can actually start living a much more sustainable lifestyle by allowing us to be wherever we want to be instantly, and have the experience that you have, without all the cost and without all the damage you do to the world.
I love the idea of the NFT use case effectively of reducing consumption, because luxury goods shift to be a digital luxury good. And so instead of having 8 cars, all of which are obviously, I mean, even if the cars burn, even if they're electric, right, just making them is a lot of carbon, right? If I just have one car and 8 punks and I just brag that way, that's kind of might be my favorite NFT use case I've heard so far. That's actually a pretty cool thought as to the idea of, do we shift consumption to a digital good instead of just having more things?
Yeah, the world will definitely move more and more to digitalizing your life, and I think you can actually be as happy. In fact, you probably can be more happy in a place where you buy less. It sounds a little bit counterintuitive, because at the end of the day, I think when we buy something, the happiness it brings us is very temporary. Within a month, whatever happiness you have from buying that nice car or that nice flat screen or whatever, it goes away, right? And so, but it's still taking up that space. It still took all that resources to create. But if we can, more use experiences as a way where we bring happiness, because honestly, that's the one thing that right now rich people and average person can't do is, not everybody can go and fly into space for 10 minutes, like I guess William Shatner did that. He spent $20 million for it. But if you put on a headset, you can go fly in there and you can live on the space station for a month for free, right? And or if you want to go dive, to the lowest of the Marianas Trenches, who can do that unless you have some super expensive submarine that you can go down there, because you can't even go down there in person. But now you put on a headset and you can go down and you can feel like you were there, and you can see the little animals that were down there, and feel what it's like to experience things that very few people in the world can do, and that creates more egalitarian society than I think we will ever have had in the past, right? Yeah, because anybody can do essentially anything that anybody else could do.
The thoughts around education, and to be honest, I really appreciate, the fact that you're talking so much about green. We've seen Bitcoin and proof of work be attacked so heavily over not being green or whatever the case is. And I always laugh, and I'm like, well, what do you think it takes to build the banks and for all the people to drive there every day and for all the, the money that's being printed, and, compared to like, yeah, I get that it's burning some electricity, but the greener the mining is, the better it's going to be. And what you're saying here now, and Web3, which to me, Web3 is community. Web3 is not a technology anymore. It's the connection of people, and the Holy Grail is kind of to live in that virtual world, that virtual metaverse. Before we get into what you guys have today, what is that Holy Grail? What is since the mid 90s when you were doing this, what is it? Is it that Black Mirror episode where we just put a little thing on our forehead and we live in our brain, or does it have to be optical?
So I think the really long-term future is something that would probably be a direct brain interface, right? Which is probably going to be more like the Matrix, which I don't think a lot of people are looking forward to. But I think in the near term, something on your face as a glasses is probably the most likely scenario for the next 10 or 15 or 20 years. There are already contact lenses that I've tried it, and actually you can, in the size of a contact lens, you could see a pretty high resolution display. And it doesn't require wires, right? And so that stuff is available. It's going to take a while to get it to a cost that people can afford. It's going to take a while to get, the power transfer to happen in a way where it does not damage your eye while it's, it's being charged. There's a lot of technical issues, but we're going to go through phases where essentially you're going to go from right now us having about 10 different gadgets or screens in our lives into less and less screens, because the more you spend time in your the devices on your head, the less you will need to have this laptop screen I have in front of me, or a phone screen, or a TV screen, because I can create a virtual screen anywhere, right? So our screens are going to come down and down. And at the end of the day, we're going to get to the ultimate experience will be essentially what we've been doing the entire history of humans, which is dreaming, right? We can dream and travel somewhere and be with somebody and feel like we're there, and we don't know the difference, right? It's kind of funny is that the most advanced we can get is to do something that we've always had. The only difference is your dream right now is something that your brain takes you on this trip and you have no way to control it. Maybe some people do, but most people don't have a way to control it. Whereas in this future long-term destination of what the metaverse or XR experience will bring you, is essentially a completely managed lucid dream that you can go where you want to go, you can do what you want to do, you can experience what you want to experience, you can be with other people and do a shared dream experience, right? That's the other thing is being able to do it together. Right now, when you dream, you do it as one person. But when you can share it with your family or with 1,000 people or maybe 1 million people at a virtual concert, right? That's the kind of thing that I think is quite exciting. Is that we're going to have the most full sensory experience that we can have with the least amount of carbon footprint that we could imagine.
So we are less of Ready Player One and more Total Recall.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it depends on which part of Total Recall. Total Recall, there's a few different sides of it, but I think at some point, yeah. I mean, I would not want to say that we will be in a virtual world 24/7, right? I think most people will probably spend as much time in there as they do going to work today. So they will probably spend a third of their time sleeping, a third of their time in the real world where they're off of the grid, hopefully, or maybe they're on, but they're not really. They're more seeing the real world, and then a third of their time in their virtual office or their virtual trip or whatever, right? I mean, right now my average daily screen time is probably 8 to 10 hours, right?
With a headset?
No, a headset. I probably spend about an hour a day in a headset right now. I don't think that the content's not there and the form factors are not there yet. But I'm talking about just total screen time of phone, PC. I don't watch TV, so if I did, I guess it'd be longer. But I think that type of screen time, we will transition to something that's on your head, right? And very soon it'll be something in your eyes, and then soon after that it'll be a chip in your head, right? So it will go through that kind of transition over the next 20 to 50 years.
Really? Mm-hmm. So there's a number of really interesting nuggets that you just threw out there. And from a practical side of where we're at today, what's missing? What's the, to get the iPod out, it took the battery, the screen, and this little mini hard drive. And clearly, HTC has a number of technologies that are available. They can invent or they can do it. But what's the thing that's just missing today that's causing a little bit of a holdup?
Honestly, we're actually a lot closer than a lot of people think to a pretty usable minimum viable product for this type of lifestyle. In fact, just last year, at the end of the year, we just launched a new product called the Vive Flow. I don't know if you saw that, but it's essentially sunglasses form factor, 6 degrees of freedom VR device, right? So it's for 180 grams. You have a full Snapdragon chip, you have memory, you have a little fan system, you have 2 high resolution displays, you have pancake lenses, and essentially you put it on as like your glasses. That type of a form factor, actually, I can wear that for hours and not feel sick. Like you were saying that in the early days of VR, and it was even worse when I started. So I think if we have that kind of form factor and maybe just a little bit lighter, a little bit smaller, I think for the next 5 or 10 years that could be actually already there, right? One thing it could help is to start getting the cloud rendering and cloud streaming capabilities on. In fact, just today we just announced at CES that we're working with Lumen on some 5G cloud rendering demonstrations, right? So that technology is already being piloted, and 5G networks are being kind of I guess, put out and put into operation around the world already. So now if we just now use those type of networks, which has super low latency, which is what's needed for you to do cloud streaming and cloud rendering. So you're not depending on a mobile chip to do your processing. You're doing it on some high-end, NVIDIA GPU or something, and then streaming it over a very low latency network. Then you can get super high fidelity, super fast responses, and lightweight. And then, if we can get battery technology a little bit better, I think that's one of the areas that hasn't improved as much. If you look at, the Moore's law has been doing great on the chip side. The network speeds have been, just going gangbusters. But the battery technology has been going up 1 to 5% a year or something, some very low single-digit numbers in terms of efficiency. If we can get that to go up a little bit more, I think then we can get the devices to be even smaller, because a lot of the weight right now, probably a third to sometimes a half of the weight of these standalone devices are the batteries, right? And if we can get them to charge faster, to have higher capacity, and then put them into just the frames of the glasses, boom, you're almost there, right? So I don't think hardware is really the limitation. I think that the bigger limitation is really user awareness of the benefits, and then also content creation, right? If we get a few more pieces of content, there's always some kind of a killer application or use case that drives a new medium to happen, right? For the PC, it was word processors and Lotus 1, 2, 3, and for I guess the Nintendo, it was Mario Brothers, right, for the consoles, right? And then for cell phones, initially it actually was audio, but then later text messaging was what made cell phones very popular all of a sudden. So, but now with an iPhone, it was really the kind of the mobile internet, right? It was the apps and the mobile web that allowed that to take off. So what we need to do now is to find what is the use case that will make people want to use it every day, right? That's what I've been challenging my team on a lot is let's find these daily use cases, things, people talk about the toothbrush test, right? If it's something that you use as much as your toothbrush, it becomes a habit, it will become ingrained in your daily life.
So while I've got you and you're a hardware guy, and you'll actually be able to explain this, when we look around the world today, what's the resolution that our eyes are seeing, and what's the actual field of view of a normal 2020 vision person?
So supposedly the theoretical limit is about 10K per eye, right? Which so we're at 5K. It's 5K for 2 eyes, so we're not that far away, honestly. And that 10K per eye resolution is only in the middle 5 degrees, right? Outside of the 5 degrees, your vision sucks. It goes down dramatically. So it's really, if you think about it, if you look at your eyes and then you think about, can I see what's around me? Everything else is really blurred. I can see some colors and shapes, but I can't see the detail. I can only see what's in front of me. Just that little, about this much of your visual field is at 10K. Right. So there's already a company called Vario. They're a European startup that makes these $10,000 devices that has a middle section that is the same resolution as your eye's acuity. But then the rest of it is more using, they essentially have two displays. One super high resolution, very tiny display right in front of a larger normal size display with normal resolution. But because of the engineering for it, it's super expensive. But that's already doable, right? So we can already today create retina resolution experiences. Not everybody can afford it. Just like when the first cell phones came out, they were $10,000, $20,000, and you put them in your car, and you had to have it installed. And then later it became a brick, that you had to bring around. And then now you have devices that everybody can buy for almost nothing. Or you get for free from your carrier.
Question on that. If I say, hey, you can build $100,000 version of Vive, right? how
Yeah.
awesome can you make it? Like, can you actually, like, are we already there? It's just not affordable, or it's just, it like literally is not in fact possible right now. If budget was not per unit, like metrics was not a like an issue.
Well, I think there's the cost, there's the size, and kind of there's the portability issues, right? So it's kind of the combination of it. The $10,000 device I was telling you about, that people, when they wear that, they're like, wow, this shows me the future where it can be. But it's a clunky device that has two wires connected to a giant GPU dual GPU type of system for it to really be running fully. And you're not going to be running around with it, right? But it's still, cost is not the issue. But getting it all the combination to work, right? It has to be small enough, it has to be cheap enough, and it has to be super high fidelity. The combination of that is actually the hard things, right? So I mean, we could fly to the moon or to Mars if you have enough money, but you can only take about 1,000 pounds of goods to Mars right now, even if you had $1 trillion, right? So it's not just a money issue.
Okay, so we're definitely still at the phase where interesting. Cool. Sorry, go ahead, Jay.
So now on that. So let's say that we've got it solved. We've got 10K per eye, and it's in a nice device. What does it even take to capture real world? So if I say, hey, and I've bought a bunch of the GoPros and VR cameras over the years, and we actually, one of our companies does VR scanning of buildings, and it's scanning things in 5K, 6K, 7K, and then you put on any level of goggles and you look around and it's just pixelated garbage. What resolution would you even have to capture these in to create that level of experience?
So I guess there's different kind of captures. There's video capture. So the problem with video capture is that even though you say, oh, it's a 5K capture, but it's 5K spread across 360 degrees, right? And whenever you're viewing it at 100 degrees, 110 degrees when you put on the headset. So you're only seeing a third of that. So you're really seeing 1K out of that 5K. Right, so that's why you're saying, hey, why is it 5K and it still sucks in resolution? But it's because I can look around and it's capturing up and down and to the side. So any one time you're only getting about 1/5 of what's been captured. Now, what things are now going to is people are actually more doing either scanning of the environments around them, and then using computer generated graphics to regenerate the experience. Right, and that you can get to much higher resolutions, or you can just completely have full vector graphics that was not even scanned at all, right? Because you can scan it and put textures on top of it, or to do enhancements to it to make it even more real. And I can zoom in and into these experiences. So I don't think using the old video capture as a way is the right way. There's also something called light field cameras that essentially you get 100 different cameras and then you capture, and these are like terabytes per second. It's just crazy kind of bandwidth needed to do it. And it allows you essentially to move around the space and feel that full parallax of having the two eyes and really feel like, wow, you're really there. But it's not very practical because both the cost of the cameras and the cost of the medium just makes it you're not able to distribute content that way. Right? So I think that the future of where most people's experiences for high fidelity experiences would be completely computer generated. So you have the Unreal Engine right now that essentially all the movies in sci-fi movies they're all made in these game engines, right? So if they're good enough to get you to feel like you're an Avenger or you're in whatever time, right? They're good enough to give you that same feeling when you're in VR. And now most of those engines can do this in real time, right? That's the thing. A lot of the movies, they're doing it in the past. They would spend hours to do one frame, and you need these giant workstations. Now, just with a normal computer, with a decent GPU, you can render real time, high resolution, completely real time graphics that are generated, based on your activity. So if you threw a rock and that rock busts into 1,000 pieces, that's being generated and simulated in real time. It's not something that was filmed and then just broadcast.
So And I think so. This is really interesting because I've always been waiting for to stand on the top of a volcano with and someone just put a camera there or flew a drone or whatever the case is. And what you're saying is what we're probably going to see is the most engaging content is going to be video games or movies where it's entirely 3D rendered environments to have the highest resolution.
Because when it's completely rendered, I can zoom in to as far as I want to the atom level, and I could simulate it, and it would still look the same resolution, right? If you filmed it, as soon as you zoom in, more than 5x, 10x, it gets pixelated. There's just no way, right? But if it's everything is computer generated, and I have the model of what that material is, and maybe even what the subatomic structure is, I could zoom down to the atomic level and see what does it look like inside a diamond, right? Or inside a rock or whatever, inside some animal, right? It's just that's a level that when you're in the real world, if you have something and you break it apart, you can see what's inside. If you're taking a video, there's no way to break it apart and then see all the details inside, right? So having the ability to generate the content in real time is really key to giving you that full fidelity experience. And also because it's responsive to what you're doing, you're going to feel like you're there. You're not just watching. Like today, the media that most of what we consume is actually just watching. It's a one-way communication, right? Whereas in the future metaverse experience, everything is an experience. Everything is something that you interact with. And having the interaction will just add so much more realism and so much more, interest to everybody around you, right? To everybody who's using it. So it's people talking about the empathy machine, VR being an empathy machine. So if you want to understand somebody, you get face to face with them and you hear them tell their story and you see, all the environment around them as they're doing that. That's very different than you just watching a 2D video where you feel like I'm distant from them. I'm not with them, right? So just creating connections, understanding, learning, any subject you want to, you're going to learn better. You're going to be more interested in, especially for kids these days. I mean, their attention span is like a goldfish, like most adults too, I guess. But if you can't engage them in some way where they're doing something that changes the environment, they're going to lose attention and think about something else, right? So I think this is something where you can teach the most complex, what we used to consider the most boring subjects in a way that makes it super enticing.
Let's talk about what HTC and what you are kind of working on today and what's available in the market, because you do have a number of really amazing products that have evolved since kind of Vive 1. Mm-hmm. You've got a number of competitors that are out in the market, but I still, again, it's a personal thesis. I've always said Vive is at the most forward thinking. If it's available, it seems like you guys throw it in there and say, we'll charge for it if you want it.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that's our philosophy is that if we put our brand on it, it has to represent kind of the best in class of what's in the market today. And there are some companies out there who are saying, hey, we want to just subsidize and get the price down, and we want to get as many people in it because our business model is to get people's information. Whereas for us, our focus is how can we give people a truly amazing XR experience that makes them want to come back and makes them want to keep using this technology. Right now, essentially the best professional level device out there is called the Vive Pro 2. It's something that we were the first one with 6 degrees of freedom devices where both your hands and your head were both 6 degrees of freedom. What that means is that you can walk around the entire room and you can see your hands and you can interact that way. And then when we had that, Oculus was using an Xbox controller, right? So they were, you were using a controller to move with your knobs on the joystick to move around, and your head can move around, but you're sitting essentially in front of a desk. and because they had a little camera that was on your desk that tracked your head. When they had that, we had the ability to walk around an entire room that was a 30 foot by 30 foot room to do that full experience. We were the first one to do standalones where you don't have to connect to a PC, and have 6 degrees of freedom on that ability to move around. We were the first one to do professional level. So the Vive Pro was the first pro level. We were the first one to do full body tracking. We had the Vive tracker that we put on your arms and your legs, your on your torso, so you can do full body tracking. People are actually making movies, doing mocap using our devices instead of these $100,000 mocap systems. You could get this done for a couple $1,000 or less, right? So it's essentially pretty much every major innovation in the industry that's happened in the last 6 years has really been, we've been the first to bring that to market. Face tracking, wireless for PC streaming. So from PCs rendering, streaming in real time to a wireless device, we were the first one to do that. And of course, just last month, we were the first one to do the glasses form factor with pancake systems. So, at every step, we want to be the first one out to market because we feel like innovation is really core part of our kind of our DNA, our tradition, right? And when HTC actually started as a phone company, I'm sure you guys know that, but the first touchscreen phone was HTC. The first dual camera phone was HTC. The first Windows mobile phone was HTC. The first Android phone was HTC. The first metal case phone was HTC, right? So just the first 3G and 4G phones were HTC, right? So with the innovation, the history of innovation we've had in the telecom space, we've essentially brought it to the XR space. And so now we have three lines of product that the Pro 2, which is our high-end professionals that are connected to a PC. We have the Focus 3, which is our device that is a standalone, and a lot of people are using it for training, for simulations, for meetings and events. And then we have the Vive Flow, which is our kind of lighter lifestyle product. More for content consumption, for meditation, for education, for meetings and events participation. So and they all have their their kind of advantages and drawbacks, right? But essentially, in their class, we represent right now the best in class of whatever class that we have our products in. As you say, we're not the cheapest. But we definitely will make sure that when people use it, they will have a very wow experience.
So, and I've been kind of playing around on the website while you've been talking, looking at these, and the Flow and it looks like the Focus 3 are both the wireless, like it's going to use cameras or whatever it is to kind of figure out where the room is.
Yes.
But as you said, the Pro 2 is using the what are they called, light towers?
Lighthouse, yeah. Lighthouse. So it's a lighthouse laser tracking. And the benefit of that is that it gives you essentially sub-millimeter precision. So if you're a designer or engineer and you want to be able to exactly move a certain thing to a certain place and see things exactly right and have 5 people all share the same space and see the same thing, then that laser tracking is really the way to go, right? Whereas, if you just want the convenience of not having cables, then the other devices are going to be a little bit less precise, but it's much more convenient and easier to set up. So it's really a trade-off of depending on the needs of the users.
So in the lighthouse mode, and where you're literally, we were stepping away from the desk, we're not in a lounge chair. The Vive 2 is meant to be like out in an open space, moving and jumping and moving around quite a bit. Where's the technology on kind of the treadmills or the ability to kind of run and move and feel like you're moving?
Yeah. I mean, there's been treadmills for a long time, and they work okay. I guess it's pretty much what the whole Ready Player One movie, they had that treadmill experience. I think that's actually there are devices that look and feel actually was based on some of the same technologies. So they did a little bit of kind of real-time research, but I don't think this is supposed to be, 20 years from now. But they were using technology that's available today. So the form factors and some of the technology they had, in fact, even the full body suits are things that are available today. So if you want, you can get a full body haptic suit, face tracking, eye tracking, brain computer interface, all of that's available. I invested in the company that already had, 3 years ago, brain computer interfaces that you can control things that are on your screen by thinking about it. Right? So that stuff is available. Right?
I'll send you my address so they can send a demo unit here, and we're happy to play with it.
Yes, it sounds like you're geeking out as much as I do. So yeah, this stuff is exciting. I mean, we have companies who you can get temperature, right? So if you feel something, you touch something, it gets warm. Or there are now devices, gloves that are haptic gloves that will mimic a spider walking on your hands. Right. It's just there's the technology out there. Really, a lot of what Stefan was saying is true. A lot of what's out there is already there. It's just not necessarily maybe price accessible to a lot of people. But the good thing about innovation technology field is that we're always going forward, and the prices are always coming down. They're always getting smaller. They're always getting cheaper. They're always getting faster. So I really don't have a lot of concern in terms of long-term trajectory of where this technology is going.
How many of your meetings are you using this for? Like, are you using this for meetings at all? Is all your internal stuff like all in VR? Like, how far along are you on that?
Yeah, I mean, we actually force our teams to do the dog food thing. So we eat our own dog food, and we use our own products for a lot of our internal meetings. For the last year and a half, every one of our major, to the public conferences that we've had, including our yearly developer conferences, everything, we've done it in VR, right? So a lot of people, they do in video, but we do in VR, and you go in and everybody's in there in a 3D environment. Even if you don't have a VR headset, you can still join in VR by using a PC or a phone and then moving around your personal avatar, right? So you're more like, you feel like you're playing a 3D video game, but at least you feel like you have presence in that space, and you have agency and the ability to move around where you want to. And in fact, you can go and walk up to somebody at a 1,000-person event and talk to them as you do right now. If I went to CES, I would go and find friends and have side chats. In fact, I feel like the hallway chats I get at major events are more valuable than what I get from listening to people on stage, because everybody on stage says the same stuff that you've heard them say 1,000 times. But the stuff that you hear face to face with somebody in the hallway, that's the real stuff, right? So you get that experience. At our last at the Flow launch, I remember I was after I did the event, I was taking a break on the lower floor of our space to kind of get away from things a little bit. And then people came up to me and was like, "Oh, Alvin, I'm glad you're here." And they started talking to me. It's like, "Oh, this is like a real event where after you speak and you're trying to get away, and people come talk to you." It's the same. It just really, it feels you can really very much simulate what you have in the real world in terms of a social experience. And we are definitely.
But like, you can do that, or if I want to say, hey, all of my company's meetings are now VR, like that's like an easy. I can set that up in a day and get everyone like a $500 headset. Like how far? Like where is it?
You can. In fact, last year, Accenture, one of our partners, they bought 60,000 devices to onboard their new employees. Right? I mean, think about this, right? Any employees that's been hired in the last year by any Fortune 500 company has not gone to the office. They have probably never met any one of their colleagues, right? How do you develop camaraderie with them? How do you develop teamwork if you've never met people face to face? So having a virtual experience where you're, letting everybody do their morning, Monday morning stand-ups or their weekly meetings or their one-on-ones to do that face-to-face experience, I think it definitely adds a lot of value. And a lot of times I used to like to take walks with my staff when I'm doing some one-on-ones instead of just having a across the desk experience, because you just feel a little bit closer. You're more open to more free to express yourself. And you can do that in VR, right? Everybody's in their own headset, in their own room, but you could be on Mars, taking a walk on Mars and then talking about next year's plans, right? Or you're in front of a beach and you're trying to get inspiration from a brainstorming, right? Absolutely possible today.
So which device do I buy to do that? Just because I'd like to try that. Which one of yours is like, get that one. That one is the good combination between price and convenience to actually do that.
Yeah. So I think if you want something that is multi-purpose and is relatively easy, I think the Focus 3 is probably the best product out there today. It's the highest spec standalone in the world right now, right? It's got 5K display. It's 120 degrees field of view. Swappable batteries. Today we just launched wrist tracking tracker systems, so that you can have your hands free. You don't have to be holding controllers, and you can track it anywhere, even behind your back. You can track it. So. So this device, I think, pretty much all this content on the standalones will run on it, as well as it can do wireless streaming using your existing Wi-Fi to your PC. So you could do processing on the PC, stream it to this device, and get the high fidelity gaming experience you want without any wires. Right. So this is the device I would recommend if you have the budget for it. I mean, it's not cheap; it's about $1,000. But what you get from it is definitely, you won't need any other device.
Awesome. I'll have to try it for the company too. That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it's fabulous. And what I just love as I was going through this is you guys have realized just put the fan in there, because sweating in these things is no fun for anyone. Yeah.
So in fact, the fan in there draws air from your face, so that if you're doing some exercise or some sports, virtual sports, it doesn't fog up your lenses, right? So you can see that it talks about staying cool. So the fan draws from your face and pushes it out on both sides, instead of just having all this electronics in front of you.
That's fabulous. So jumping over to we got one more device I want to talk about before we move on to the next segment, and only because we are a relative crypto show. Mm-hmm. Blockchain phone.
Yeah.
Are you able to talk about this guy?
Sure. So we were actually the first guys in the world, the first company in the world to launch commercial blockchain phones like 3 years ago. And hard code wallets inside these phones that are protected, so people can't hack into your wallet. I think that's actually, in fact, when we first sold it, you could only buy it with Bitcoin. So it was definitely made for that community. And the funny thing is, we've actually, when we first made it, it was there was more of a project of love by one of our team leaders. But because of the Bitcoin prices going up, we actually became very profitable. that product became a very profitable product for us, even though it wasn't intended to be. So. Which is kind of a nice side effect, I guess. But I guess if you started early with Bitcoin 3 or 4 years ago, I'm sure you're all doing well. So, or 10 or 12 years ago. So
your goal on this is to eliminate these ledger devices, these the little deal. And to be clear, I'd much prefer it to be in my phone than to have all these little things I run around with constantly.
Yeah.
User interface and all sorts of things. But the difference is that's an actual hardware wallet. You guys are running you've built an entire chip in the phone that's separate from the normal phone chip, correct?
So it's actually a special secure area of the chip of the central processor that is segregated from the rest of the processing. So it is something that is hardware secure, that is built into the phone itself. But in fact, we could probably also license this technology to other hardware manufacturers to enable them to have that same capability.
And it's running an entire Bitcoin node.
Yeah.
Which is really, again, 5G and everything else you're trying to do. That's just fabulous to think about.
Yeah. So I mean, we're like I said, we're ahead of the game in a lot of areas. But I think we just need to be recognized for it so that we can scale to what we deserve to be.
Fabulous. And that technology, and again, just being in your company's ecosystem, clearly we're talking more about kind of the metaverse and visual, but when you talk about Web3, cryptocurrencies are right there. So having that in your portfolio that you can use in your heads-up displays is I'm sure something that you guys have talked about in more than one meeting.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're really looking to create the infrastructure platform to support the full next generation metaverse, including the kind of some of the decentralized capabilities. And having NFTs are going to be more and more important, not just for collecting art or trading and speculating, but also just for the functionality of being able to take your virtual assets across virtual worlds. Right now, when you go to Roblox and you buy Robux, or you go to Fortnite and you put in your deposits, they stay in their world. There's no way to exchange that value. If I bought something in one world, I can't go to another world with it. So you need some kind of a mechanism that is recognized by all of these independent worlds of what your rights are, what your assets are, what value you have, right? So I think there's definitely a need for some kind of mechanism to do that. Now, which blockchain it will be, who will win at the end, who knows? I don't know, right? But I think that the base technology definitely has value in that space, far beyond just the art speculation that a lot of people are using NFTs for.
I completely agree with that.
So actually, we had this problem before. Like, can we do these interviews in there? Is there a decent software that lets us do that?
Yeah. In fact, we invest in a company called Engage. So actually, the product's called Engage. We've been doing our events in them. If you're just doing small chats of 20 to 30 people, we actually make a product called Sync that comes directly with the product. We'll give it to you for free, but for 20 or 30 person meetings. But if you want to do events of 1,000 people or 100,000 people, Engage can allow you to do that. We can do pre-production, pre-record an entire 5-hour event, and we've done this for multi-track conferences with special effects and flying rockets and flying whales and Play-Doh rising up from the ground. We can do all that. In fact, I put our headset onto everybody in the audience. When the pandemic first came out, I put virtual protection suits, personal protection gear onto everybody in the audience, to really prove a point about, the importance of safety and, education about the whole virus protection stuff. So it's, the technology's there, the software's there. It's actually quite mature. If you need an introduction, I'm happy to put you in touch with the people who do that. In fact, I would think you might want to do some of your shows where you're actually doing the interview in that experience and then streaming out from that virtual space using kind of OBS, and that way.
Yeah, we also have people who like to be anonymous, so it'd be nice to have an avatar-based one, because otherwise we just end up talking to a black screen, which isn't as cool.
Yeah.
So it'd be cool to be able to do that.
You can do that. In fact, what you can also, if you want to do a hybrid model, is that you can have them go into VR, stream their inside from their interface, go into a Zoom meeting, use their avatar, but you're using your faces, and they're able to track their movements. And all that is available today.
Love it.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. In fact, just last couple of weeks ago, I did an interview with a Chinese TV station where we did the whole interview in our software, and then they broadcast it as a kind of a normal interview, but it was completely all 3D. So I just did it from my living room, and they were 1,000 miles away or 10,000 miles away in China, and it still looked like we were together.
I'm definitely going to be trying this, and definitely going to be reaching out to you afterwards.
Yeah.
As we move into kind of the final segment, it really comes back to you. What are you interested in today? What is kind of things that you're seeing super cool? And it can be games that are available that you can already play with the Vive, or just anything that you're excited for in the Web3 ecosystem.
I think the thing that I'm pretty excited, I think, about the future of the metaverse intersection with Web3 is the ability for anybody to generate income without leaving their home, right? And the ability for them for creators to really unleash their creativity and be recognized for it, and have a market for it. In fact, to create sustainable income, even for non-creators, to play a role as a reality actor inside these virtual worlds, right? So I mean, you guys are, I'm sure, very familiar with the whole Axie Infinity thing, where they're essentially farming goods and then reselling it. I feel like that's a temporary solution, right? And it's really the value being created is very limited. But what if we created a world where you have virtual classrooms and a teacher goes in, and this could be a Nobel Prize winner teacher, puts on a headset and teaches a class of 1 million kids, and then gets paid a penny per person to teach that class, right? I mean, they could make a lot more money that way than they do today, teaching a class of 50 grad students.
And I agree. We interviewed Gabby a couple weeks ago, and he really did talk a lot about the future of play to earn, and was very clear that it's not a matter of games over the long run.
Yeah, and also if you look at tutoring, right? Right now, in particular in China, it's been a real issue where people are paying $100 an hour for tutoring, for English, for math, for science, so that they can pass these tests. And you get people who are spending an hour or something each way in traffic to get to a place to do a tutoring session for an hour. Where if you put this on, you're next to them, you could do that tutoring and be able to tutor maybe multiple people at a time. And you have, at least the minimum is you remove all of the commute that you have in that friction time, right? So, and also, if you do have a chance, read a book called Diamond Age by Neil Stephenson. I think he creates this concept of actors, the reality actors, where in the world, in the future, where we spend most of our time in a virtual world, there's a lot of people that are just in there to be your guide, right? So if you're let's say you're going to a formal event, what do? And you bring in a person to guide you. They're like a reality actor that gives you that they're like that side-by-side coach that can guide you through how do you talk to these business people, or how do you go through a pitch meeting or whatever, right? And it could be somebody that's invisible to other people but is visible to you. So it's I think there's a lot of ways for people to create income beyond just farming virtual goods.
Yeah, and especially in gaming too. I mean, if just NPCs get replaced by like real actors,
yeah.
Like I think that's you playing whatever Fallout, right?
Yeah.
And instead of some like weird cutscene, right, you actually have somebody who's like there, and like there's like literally like 4 people acting the whole thing out for you. Like
yep.
It's going to be so much more interesting. The dialogue, it's going to be interactive.
Exactly.
So yeah, that's going to be such a cool use case.
Yeah, and for a lot of people who are, let's say, in third world countries or developing nations, I mean, for them, getting $1 an hour is a lot of money, right? So if you can then create, I guess, a pool of work for people that if you're paying $5 an hour for this, let's say, an escape room, and you have a real guide there that's actually helping guide you through this escape room. That's actually kind of cool. And you're having a real conversation with a real person. They may be, 10,000 miles away from you, but they feel real. And you felt like you actually had an escape room with your all 5 of your friends could actually all be at their homes. But in fact, they already have something like this. There's a company, I can't remember the name now, but they essentially have this virtual escape room where real people are in there guiding you. And, they're spending, I think, $40 or $50 for a 45-minute session. So they're not cheap. But, having that real person, if you go to a real escape room, you're probably paying that same kind of, amounts anyways. So, but then your cost goes down dramatically because you can source that person from anywhere. Because, for those kind of experiences, the human labor is actually the biggest cost for a lot of them, right? Or if you're talking about, let's say, Sleep No More. I don't know if you guys have seen those kind of immersive theater, right? You go into a building, and inside the building, half the people are actors, half the people are audiences. And you put on this mask, and you're the audience, and they know by the mask that you wear. And then the actors are just around you doing their life, doing their scenes. And you can go into that scene anywhere, but they're real actors, doing these things. So it's just that's the kind of thing that I think would be super, I guess, interesting type of a use case for these virtual actors. That then creates a new form of income, a new career for people. For people who couldn't make it to Broadway, you could be a reality actor.
Yeah, and even then, it's just the idea, I feel like what it really does too is right now if you're saying, hey, you can go through this video of whatever, like a street in Thailand, right? It's kind of cool to walk through a pre-recorded video, right? But if the entire thing is legit interactive, because all the people that are in that street in Thailand are actually people, right? Mm-hmm. It becomes a whole different thing, right? It's not just because all the VR stuff, it's more of it's super cool to see it around you, right? But it's just the form factor is different. The experience is basically the same thing, maybe a bit more immersive. But the interactivity of the ability to say, no, everyone here is real.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about the most random thing, they will indulge you, right?
Yeah.
So it's so interesting to think about how that changes the entire experience, right? And I think the play to earn side, especially with crypto, obviously, it's just such an interesting fit.
So I think you're gonna have a new concept called play to live instead of play to earn, because or live to earn. Sorry, live to earn, because you're not playing just to play games and create no value. You're actually going to be living your life as if you were in the real world, but you're living it as a performance for somebody else. And then you can actually make money living. In fact, if you think about it from a really high level, what do we do? We're actually playing a game of life that we're living to earn, right? We go to work to make money, to buy stuff, to raise our kids, to do travel, right? We're living to earn. And we can take that same concept and do it on a virtual platform. So the digital world is going to become more and more real as we start getting, not just from a perception perspective, but also from a societal perspective as we progress into this next age.
It's interesting to think that AI is not actually the thing that's going to make that happen. It's literally just no, we're just going to put real people in there. Forget about AI that's smart enough to make it feel immersive. We're just going to hire real people. It's way easier for everyone. It's way more immersive. It's going to actually work much better too.
And I think it solves the real issue that we're going to have, which is labor overabundance labor, right? What are you going to do with this unemployment issue, right? Because as AI takes over factories, as AI takes over transportation, we're going to have millions and millions of people who are out of work. What are they going to do, right? So I think our life, the amount of time, the type of activities we do are going to significantly change as we transition into this new age. And the things that we value will actually be different. In fact, there's one slide I want to share with you. A lot of people say, hey, the metaverse is going to replace the internet. It's the next internet, right? I actually see it as a little bit differently. Essentially, what I think is that the metaverse expands the internet, right? All the existing internet infrastructure behaviors will still be here for some amount of time, or quite an amount of time, right? But instead of being vendor specific and using our IDs and profiles, we're going to go to universal IDs, universal avatars, right? And that also may be an area where NFTs will play a role. Instead of going to websites and apps, we're going to go to virtual 3D worlds and experiences. Instead of watching videos and listening to audio and text, we're going to go into 3D everything, right? 3D spatial videos, 3D spatial worlds. Instead of having short videos and live streaming, we're going to have live streaming, where people are going to essentially stream their entire life experience in a kind of flowing way, and having virtual idols be a lot of it instead of just real people. Instead of just consuming, and rating people as the only activities we do right now on the internet. We're going to go in and be engaging in experiences. We're going to inhabit worlds. We're going to spend a real significant amount of time there. Instead of just using PCs and tablets and phones, we're going to now add on VR and XR devices and classes. Although I think a lot of people are still, in the midterm, will still use traditional 2D devices to access these 3D content. They will just be using it as we play video games today, 3D video games on 2D devices. Instead of using 2D screens and keyboards and mouse, we're going to go full natural interface, right? Being your hands, your eyes, your mouth, your body, your legs. You're going to be able to dance in these worlds, not just be able to move around and stretch, right? Instead of income models or business models being just ads and content, sales and physical goods commerce, we're going to have virtual commerce and that live to earn concept I was talking about. And virtual commerce will be very, I think, NFT related. And instead of just using fiat and in-game currency and designation of ownership, we will have universal wallets, universal currency, and universal ownership that will be very related to what you guys, probably are talking about on a daily basis. Now, again, which one of the solutions will actually win out at the end, I don't think anybody knows. But this technology will become increasingly important as we move increasingly into a virtual world for our daily lives. And instead of going into independent apps and independent walled gardens in terms of all the games and the websites and social networks, they're all independent walled gardens. We will have interconnected open world that you have, say, one identity that you go into any world, just like you do in the real world. I can walk into any store and they're not, they're all owned by different people, but I'm the same me. I can use the same credit card, to buy goods with them and buy services with them. Right? It will be the same way. And instead of collecting likes and followers to create our status, we will collect memories, friendships, as we do in the real world. We're going to feel like we've done something. We're going to feel like we've been with somebody, right? And those are the things. It's the memories that you collect that really you remember at the end, of your life. And I'm actually doing a lot of thinking about this these days because I'm spending a lot of time with my dad right now with his after his stroke. I'm kind of doing a lot of taking care of it. It makes me go back and think what's really important in life. And having things is actually not that important, right? It's really the relationships you've built and the memories you've had and the people you've affected. So I think those are the kind of things. If you go to the third row is the in real life, which things are actually more like the real life. Pretty much everything on the metaverse side is going to be more like the real world is today than the internet is. Than the internet kind of digital life that we have on the today's internet, the internet 2.0.
A more natural interaction.
Yeah,
per se.
Exactly. So I think that the metaverse is making the digital more real, right? Even though it's more digital, it's more virtual, but it's actually our lives in this metaverse will be more real than anything we've had on the internet today, on the Web 1 or Web 2.0. And it's going to bring us more and more like what we do in the physical world. So I wanted to share this slide with you.
No, I love that. Thank you.
That's so interesting too, because I think one of the interesting problems with all this stuff is, right, it's like really hard to imagine how it's going to turn out. And I think it's mostly because you're like, well, I mean, traveling is clearly better than real travel is clearly better than digital travel. Right. But I think what's so interesting about what you were just talking about is it's going to be all these use cases that aren't possible today. Right. And maybe it's not, maybe you can still travel. Right. That'll be the fun thing you do once a month. Right. But let's all travel to the moon. Right. It's going to be these other experiences and this new combination of how do you combine them into something that is truly unique and different. It's so hard to be oh, this is going to be awesome because of the things that don't exist yet. It's so hard to think about well, it's going to replace travel. It's obviously going to be worse than actual travel. So this is silly. Yeah. So it's easy to come to that wrong conclusion by not thinking about what are the use cases we haven't thought of yet.
So I think there's a point I want to make on that is I think we're in the lucky kind of top 5% of the world where we can travel on a monthly basis. But I would think that 80% of the world are not able to do that. Maybe once a year, maybe even less. Maybe some of them have never been on a plane, right? A lot of people have never been on a plane. Half the world have never left more than 100 miles from their homes. So what this enables is that everybody can travel. Now, they may not be getting that 100% experience that you're talking about if you go to the beach and you feel the water go between your toes or the sand going between your toes. But they get to feel like, oh, I've gone to the beach. I've heard the waves. I've seen other people there. I can do a virtual surfing, whatever, right? I can do a lot of the things I would have done. Maybe it's not as nice, but it didn't cost me, $10,000, right? And it didn't take me, 3 days of travel to get to this place to spend, 3 days there, right? And I didn't have to take a bunch of vaccines and shots and tests to go both sides, and I didn't need to quarantine for 14 days, right? Those are the kind of things that I think are going to be that's part of the perspective. I think we should also, being YPOers, because I was a YPO for 7 years. We're a very lucky community, right? We're at a very lucky time in our lives and an ability to live certain things that a lot of people don't get a chance to, and most people. We should be also looking at how can this kind of technology, or how can what we're doing impact the other part of people who maybe not as fortunate.
Alvin, I absolutely love that statement, and we're going to go ahead and give you a gift on that. You didn't really talk too much about NFTs, but you talked a little bit about them. We have our own community token that we do, and I'm going to let you pick whichever one you want. So we have a variety of these things, and they're actual 3D. So you will be able to take this and put it right into one of your metaverses and see these massive whales swimming around. Nice. They all have different skins. They, again, same thing you said, high quality, and again, tons and tons of them. Do you have you can pick a number and I can randomly select one, or you can pick a name and I'll pull it up.
If you just a blue one, blue is my kind of navy type of blue is my favorite kind of color. So yeah, that looks great.
Perfect. Well, we will get that over to you. I thank you so much for your time today. And honestly, that was one of the most enlightening hardware, metaverse conversations that we've had. And I just have to say, I'm really excited and would love to do this again, but in the metaverse.
For sure.
If you wouldn't mind hosting us next time around.
No problem. I'm happy to. Let's do that in one of those apps that I mentioned. And just get yourself a Focus 3 or a Vive Flow, and we should be able to get in there and no problem.
No. If you can't tell by the setup and everything else, it's going to be the Pro 2 with the lighthouses and everything else. And,
you're going full out. Okay.
Oh yeah, no. We're not going to mess around with this if there's no reason. So Alvin,
I'll get the reasonable one to get the real experience. Well, they're not even more expensive though. The Focus 3 is the same price as the Pro 2, right?
Roughly. Yeah, roughly. But the difference is you don't have a PC. So with the Pro 2, you need a GPU, high-end GPU PC for it to run on.
We got all these guys with mining. We'll just have to steal one out of one of their rigs, and we'll be fine.
All right, good.
Perfect.
Well,
so
thanks again, guys.
Much. Hold on for 1 second. And
this is awesome. Thanks.